This video has been funded in part by the Guild via Patreon. Check out the links in the description or at the end of this video for more details. Hello everybody, my name is Gildart, and welcome back to another Pros vs. Cons review, the show where I present my complete list of pros and cons. A couple of weeks ago I took a look at the first Ken's Rage, which I did play when it originally came out. Its sequel, however, took me a little while to play. This was for a couple of reasons. Fist of the North Star Ken's Rage 2 released for PS3 and Xbox 360 on December 20th, 2012 in Japan, February 5th, 2013 in North America, and just 3 days later on February 8th in Europe. We would also get a Wii U port on January 31st, 2013 in Japan, and February 7th in both North America and Europe. Yeah, it's weird how we here in North America got the Wii U port 2 days after the PS3 and 360, but Europe got it a day before. Anyways, the reason why this is so significant to how it took me so long to get around to playing this game is because by this time I had got my PS3 and was primarily playing on it. There were quite a few Warriors games I missed out on being an Xbox player. I still prefer my Xbox, but it's just more convenient to play all of my games on one console. When Ken's Rage 2 got released, it was during a time where Sony of America wasn't allowing certain games to get physical releases on the console. I did pick this up on 360 because of course I did. But Ken's Rage 2 wasn't the only game out around this time that took my attention. Warriors Orochi 3 Hyper was released the November before on the Wii U, which was another console we never got a physical release for Ken's Rage 2, making the 360 the only physical for this game in my region. Later that year, we would also get Dynasty Warriors 8 on PS3 and 360, as well as Tokiden The Age of Demons on Vita. Koei was feeding us good, but I feel like many of us missed the plate of Ken's Rage 2 that was on the table, which is really weird.
I usually have a pretty big appetite.
I'm pretty sure there were other games I was playing at the time, like BioShock Infinite, which was a PlayStation Plus game at one point, and that's how I originally played through it. But I would later get around to playing through Ken's Rage 2. It was like several years later, but they say it's better late than never. I was very pleased to hear that they expanded on what we got with the first entry because that felt like such a great evolution of beat-em-up games. But maybe I'm getting a little too far ahead of myself. Don't forget to give this video a like, comment with your thoughts below, and of course subscribe if you haven't already. Alright, let's take a look at Ken's Rage 2 with the first pro. Starting things off strong, Fist of the North Star Ken's Rage 2 expands the story we got from the first game exponentially. Not only does the story take us farther than Ken and Rao's final battle, but we also get more leading up to that point. I also still haven't got around to reading the manga yet, but I feel like Ken's Rage 2 gives us the majority of important events. On top of that, we only get one story this time around, which may seem like a con at first, but where the first Ken's Rage gave us a story for Kenshiro, Rei, Mamiya, Toki, and Rao, they all shared many stages with each other, Kenshiro being the one character with unique chapters. This time around, we play through the entire story in one go. No more multiple character playthroughs with the exact same stages. Instead, we get something similar to what we would see with Dynasty Warriors 8's story. Here we get to switch characters when a stage has more than one for us to play as. Sometimes the stage will play out a little differently depending on the character you pick. Legend mode in Ken's Rage 2 is structured exactly like the first game. It feels like the natural evolution of 2D beat-em-up games like Final Fight, Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, etc. You have these large maps that you explore. You may find secrets like chests with scrolls, or you may find a group of enemies in desperate need of an ass whooping. That's a fine ass looking ass you got there, and I think I'm gonna go all Beastie Boys and kick it. We also get a lot more story in this game. Gone are the narrated expositions in favor of these comic book style cutscenes, and way more in-game cutscenes too. The first Ken's Rage really had me wanting to read the manga and watch the anime, but Ken's Rage 2 makes me need it. If you ever want to experience the story of Fist of the North Star, but want it in video game form, you should definitely pick up Ken's Rage 2. Con! Now, even though Legend Mode does a great job of delivering the story of Fist of the North Star, Dream Mode leaves a whole lot to be desired. In the first game, Legend Mode served as a 3D evolution on the more traditional 2D beat-em-up gameplay loop. With Ken's Rage 2, that fact is still true, but where the first game gave us the usual Musou gameplay experience in Dream Mode, Ken's Rage 2 gives us a very lackluster, bare-bones Musou experience. Gameplay here is very close to what we saw in Dynasty Warriors Gundam 3 and the first One Piece Pirate Warriors. We have multiple bases with no troops moving between them. Now this is for a couple of reasons, but mostly because there's no point in enemies moving around. So wait, what's the point of the enemies? Well, that's the fun part. There is no point. Here's the thing, when you start the stage out, every base is an enemy base. You have no ally bases. In fact, you rarely have allies, and if you do, they're just an ally officer. You must capture 5 bases in order to take on the commander. It doesn't really matter which bases you take, but at the same time, it kinda does. You see, each base has a level. The higher the level, the more points you get for capturing it. The more points you accumulate, the higher your rank. The higher your rank, the more buffs you get. These buffs can be an increase to speed, health, etc. So you want to aim for an A rank in order to have all of the buffs you can get. In order to get the A rank, you want to aim for the highest level bases first. Here's the kicker. All the bases are connected by different paths. This is very similar to classic Empires titles where you're trying to make a path from your main camp to the enemies. The difference with Ken's Rage 2 is that you're not making a path. Instead, when you capture an enemy base, it lowers the level of all of the adjacent bases that are connected, meaning you will get less points if you capture those bases now. That being said, there's one more aspect of the bases and points you should think about, and that's the bonus requirements. Each base has a bonus mission, like taking out so many enemies with green health, or taking them out with only charge attacks. This is also ranked from E to A. The higher the rank on the bonus mission, the higher the points you get from capturing the base to go towards your overall point ranking to get the buffs. As well, the ranking that gives you buffs goes towards your overall stage rank, where you're graded on things like total points, damage taken, time to complete, etc. Ugh, something smells rank. This may all seem complicated, but once you realize that you're going to earn the same number of points out of a level 7 and 4 base that's connected to each other, no matter which one you take out first, it becomes super easy to plan your path. If you take out the level 7 first, you'll get a large number of points up front, and the level 4 will turn into a level 3. If you take out the level 4 first, you don't get as many points, but the level 7 base will be easier to take out now that it's a level 6. Once you get that down, you can pretty easily glance at the map before jumping into a stage and know where you need to go to optimize the amount of points you'll earn. Enemy and ally AI is useless here. People say that about modern Warriors games, but you haven't seen anything until you've played Ken's Rage 2's Dream Mode. Enemies don't try to take back any bases, which means you have no reason to care about a base after capturing it. It would have been a good challenge if bases taken back by enemies lowered your overall points. Enemy officers just chase down the closest allied officer, whether that's you or someone else. Because of this, I tend to ignore any enemy officers until I get to the commander. If there are allied officers, they may go attack them. If I'm alone, they'll chase me down and eventually find me in a base. Ally officers just try to capture the closest base to them, meaning they may capture a base of a lower level, which still counts towards your total points. Thanks to this, any stage with allied officers can be a challenge to guarantee an A rank by the end of the stage, which is also why I leave enemy officers alone when I have allies. It's almost better for my allied officers to get killed so they don't take lower level bases and hinder me from getting an A rank. Now, there are stages that play out a little differently, like a couple of stages for characters like Kenshiro, Jaggi, or Rei. These stages are just fights against other characters, no bases or anything to capture. So with those stages, you rely solely on your ability to take little damage and kill them within a short period of time so you can still get the A rank on them. Because of the structure of these stages and how big they are, it can lead to the stages feeling very empty. There's nothing happening in these stages except capturing bases and fighting enemy officers. There is a story that happens in Dream Mode, but it happens before and after the stage. Nothing really happens during, not even with the enemy commander, which I have some complaints about as well. Commanders will heal themselves if they're not attacked for a certain period of time. That time is fairly short, so if they push you away far enough, they can start to heal by the time you run back to them. As well, they seem to be programmed to stay in their original spawn area. So if you push them far enough out of this area, they'll just hop back to where they started, meaning by the time you run back to their spawn location, they would have healed a little bit. If you're taking on an easier stage, this won't be much of a problem, but the problem lies when you are just slowly shaving down the commander's health. It's so annoying, and I don't know why you would want to play this version of Dream Mode over the original.
Bro,
When I reviewed the first game, I mentioned that the game's combat is some of the best in the franchise. Well, what would you do if I told you that Ken's Rage 2 was even better?
Come on, I only have so many pairs of pants!
One criticism I had about the first game was that it was slow, but that helped with how methodical the combat was. It truly looked like a master martial artist flowing gracefully through the battlefield. Well, that does help with realism, but not as much with the fantastical combat we usually get with modern Musou games. Ken's Rage 2 takes this combat system and speeds it up by about 25%. Now, this is what the usual Musou gameplay feels like. You have the usual controls. Square is normal attack, triangle is charge attack, circle is Musou, L1 is guard, R2 is a special move, and just like the first game, R1 is a grapple. L2 is where your taunt is. In the first game, you had to do something like hold guard and press R3. Taunting makes enemies attack you more. Now, L3 and R3 don't do anything. Pressing select can zoom in and out of the minimap, but pressing it a third time will turn the map off completely, just like in the first game. The overall speed and how you taunt aren't the only differences to the combat. One of the biggest complaints I had about the combat of the first game was that dodging was a special move only shared by Kenshiro and Rei. With Ken's Rage 2, everyone has a dodge mapped to X, and there's no jump anymore.
To all the people who said not to remove jump in my Dynasty Warriors 10 video, suck it!
Finally, it feels like all the characters are complete. In the first game, characters who may be on the weaker side, like Mamiya, were a pain in the ass when you'd start an attack only to see an enemy charging up theirs.
Well, I guess I'm committed to taking this damage.
Now that everyone has listened to the sound advice of Piccolo, we have a mechanic that you're going to make a lot of use of, especially when taking on enemy officers and commanders. Not only do you have a basic dodge mechanic, but if you dodge at the right time, then attack right after, you'll do a counterattack that could stagger or knock back an enemy. Now, what if you run up against Kenshiro and he unleashes his Hokuto Hyakuratsuken? Well, you can avoid that entire Musou attack with well-timed dodges. The thing with Musou attacks is that usually the animation lasts too long to pull off a counter and have it actually hit them. So keep that in mind so you don't leave yourself open like I often do. One last thing about the combat is that there's so much variety in how characters play. This is very similar to how Samurai Warriors 2 differentiated their characters with slightly different combo styles. However, in Ken's Rage, instead of implementing these differences to separate power, technique, or other types of characters, they use these different control styles for the different martial arts styles. This was done in the first Ken's Rage, but it's way more prominent in Ken's Rage 2 now that the roster has been filled in with way more characters. Where the first game had 8 characters, 10 with DLC, Ken's Rage 2 has 22 characters, or 25 with DLC. Some of the characters that I mentioned in the first video got to become playable. Juza, Fudo, Ryuga, and Yuta all became playable. Amiiba became a DLC character, which I'm actually fine with. He had more importance in the first game as Jaggy's friend during his Dream Mode story. Thanks to this though, we got more Nanto characters, who all have a special mechanic that no other style has. When an enemy is about to attack you, time slows down slightly, and you'll be prompted to press triangle to counter them. If you're successful, your character will glow and a filter with that character's aura color will be applied. Now your attacks are slightly stronger and your charge attack will change to be a more devastating attack. Overall, the combat here is great. With the structure of Legend Mode, this creates probably one of the best gameplay experiences of a 3D beat-em-up ever.
Con!
That being said, there's not much of a feeling of progression beyond your stats. all characters start with their full combo unlocked right from the get-go. Meaning for those of us that have already played Ken's Rage, we don't need to deal with the base combo. However, that means that any new characters feel like they've already been leveled up to the point where they have the max combo before you even get to them. I know it can be annoying, especially if you come directly from the previous game, to have to deal with the lower combo at first, but you miss out on that feeling of progression when you have the full combo available from the start. Like I said, the only real sense of progress is in your stats. As you get stronger, you'll be able to take on harder stages, so if you jump into a more difficult stage with a weaker character, the sense of progress sets in pretty fast. But if you just play through Legend Mode and Dream Mode stories in the proper order, you won't notice that. How you level up is by gathering karma, which can be picked up from defeated enemies, chests, or by destroying the environment. Depending on how the enemies were defeated, you'll level up one of your stats. This feels very much like Final Fantasy II, where you may increase your defense by getting attacked. You also increase your stats by using scrolls. This is similar to the items of classic games, but with a unique twist. Each scroll has a level from 1 to 7. These scrolls also have 3 slots for stat increases. So you may have a level 5 scroll that increases strength, health, and spirit. Some scrolls may even have an added ability like increasing your speed after defeating an enemy. Each character can equip up to 5 scrolls, and the order you equip them is also very important. If you want to get the most out of your scrolls, you want to chain the stats with each other. So let's say you have 3 scrolls that all have strength as the stat on the left slot. You can put all 3 scrolls next to each other and you'll get a boost to the strength buff. Each character also has a limit to how many scrolls they can have on hand. So if you reach that limit, you have to discard scrolls if you receive any more. Scrolls can be shared between characters by proffering them to the Caryatid and receiving them as another character. All this sounds pretty good until you find out it doesn't really matter if you give a weaker character a bunch of good scrolls to take on a harder stage, that weaker character will still get level 1 scrolls afterwards. It doesn't seem like the level of the scrolls is tied to the difficulty of the stage. Instead, it seems to be more based on how many times that character has been taken into a stage. After finishing Legend Mode, I wanted to play as the characters that weren't playable, like Kaio or Rin. So I proffered up some of my best scrolls from my Legend Mode playthrough and got low-level scrolls no matter what stage I took on. But when I decided to play through Kenshiro's Dream Mode, I was getting level 5 and 6 out of the first stage. As well, the scrolls you get and equip during Legend Mode only stay equipped to Kenshiro afterwards. Even though you play as other characters, you don't earn or equip any scrolls for them even if you play as them. To my knowledge, you can still earn stat boosts by gaining karma, but that's about it. I just kinda wish each character had their own scrolls, whether they were in Legend or Dream Mode. And I wish the stage difficulty mattered as to the scrolls you get.
Pro.
I know I usually mention graphics as the first pro because it tends to be the first thing anyone's going to notice. The thing is, at first, Ken's Rage 2 just looks like the previous game. I mean, in Japan, this is known as Shin Hokuto Musou, so it's kinda like an expanded version of the first game. But when you actually have the game in your hands and play through it, you'll notice a decent amount of differences with this game that bring it a step ahead of the first. The texture quality is about on par with the first game, and we get those newly designed costumes that are unique to the Musou games. Where you're going to notice the most difference is in performance and color palette. The first game had the brown filter issue that many games from that generation had. We still get barren desert stages that are filled with dirt and sand, but we also get stages that have vegetation, stages at night, and even stages in camps and bases. The variety of stages here is way better than what we saw with the first game. Frame rate and lag are also a lot more reliable. You do still have some dropped frames when the camera pans behind parts of the environment, but it's not as bad as the first game. Overall, the visuals you get from this game are a decent enough of an improvement from the first. Even though the visuals look good, especially with this being mostly stuck on the 7th gen consoles, the cutscenes drop frames and lag almost all the time. It's surprising when you see how smooth the cutscenes were in the first game. There's not really much of a difference in the graphics of the first and the second game. Most of the visual improvements are around frame rates and overall performance, which is strange to think that that increase in performance does not translate to the cutscenes. I found though this is a specific problem with the PS3 version. I don't notice nearly as much of an issue on the 360 version, however the cutscenes in that port are capped at 30 as opposed to the 60 of PS3. This also happens during the comic book style cutscenes we get at the beginning and end of most stages. Regular full motion cutscenes are usually used for the more important scenes, while exposition and setup get that comic book style. I like these as opposed to the narrator crawl we get in the first game, but would it have really been that much work to have these be a little more animated? There are some scenes where the character models move, but others where it's like the camera is just panning around a 3D still frame. It just feels kind of awkward at times. Speaking of awkward, the button prompts for certain things just don't feel right. I know this isn't really overly important in the grand scheme of things,
But I am here to pick nits, and this is as nitty as it gets.
one specific prompt is where you're picking something up to use as a weapon, something like a pole or a girder. The prompt is triangle. In the first game, the prompt was the same as grapple, which makes sense. I know this is small fries, but I like fries, okay? We also have a few things just completely missing from this game. We no longer have an English dub. This is probably the most disappointing thing to remove from this game. The English dub is one thing that helped me immerse myself into the story. It's not that the Japanese dub is bad, but as a native Canadian where English is my first and only language, it can be difficult to immerse myself in a game when I have to read the text instead of paying attention to the action on screen. Not to mention how my ADHD-riddled brain is a slow reader and it takes time to register the words that I'm seeing. One other thing that's missing from this game is the battle damage. I forgot to mention this during the first review, but in the previous game, after taking certain amounts of damage, your costume would slowly develop battle damage. That's not completely missing from this game, but instead of torn clothes, we just get bruised and bloody. That is with the exception of Rin and Mamiya. You know, the only two female characters in the game. They get the same battle damage as before. Clothes get torn, but they don't get nearly as bruised and bloodied as the other characters. Like, I'm not sad that we get progressively more revealing clothes for the female characters, but it doesn't make sense that we don't get the same treatment for the men.
We're equal opportunity in this household.
As well, there are some issues with the costumes we do get. You don't get any additional costumes for finishing Legend Mode. They're all tied to Dream Mode. We also get 4 unlockable costumes, which matches the number that we got in the first game. We still get Healthy Toki and White-Haired Rei, but we don't get Shirtless Kenshiro or Rao anymore. They are just held back for use in specific moments in the story. No, the new costumes we get to replace those are Helmetless Jaggy, which is really cool to see him without his helmet. In fact, the beginning of his Dream Mode story has him without his helmet already. The 4th costume though, continuing the fan service trend, we get Mamiya in a towel. Yep, it was part of a scene when Ken shows up at Mamiya's village and Rei is introduced, so why not give us that costume to use, right? I mean, my opinion of this is very similar to Mamiya and Rin being the only characters to experience battle damage. Why would you only give us this costume? Like, we should have Shirtless Ken and Rao, but we should also get Eye Patch Shachi. There are other outfits that we see throughout the story, like Rao and Kaio in their full armor, but we never get to play as these outfits. I'm so surprised that there's this much left out of the game that we could have got. None of these costumes are DLC either, which is the most surprising. I feel like Koei Tecmo could have made some money off of this, but they decided to have these remain cutscene only costumes. The last thing that I'll mention that got removed may seem small to some, but it's important to me and a whole lot of other fans of the Musou franchise. I greatly appreciated the fact that we got intro animations in the first game. They add a little extra detail and help me get pumped for taking out half the neighborhood with a press of a single button. But they fucked it up here. Where the first game transitioned very smoothly into gameplay, we don't get that here. Instead, the intro animation happens somewhere on the map and your starting position may be different. So instead of moving the intro animation to your spawn location, it just fades to black and then fades into gameplay. This is so stupid and looks poorly planned. But the smooth transition isn't the thing that they took away that has me pissed. They took away the victory animations. How do you have intro animations but no victory animations? I honestly haven't done my research, but I feel like this is the only Warriors game to do that. It feels so backwards. I am literally struggling to come up with words to convey just how I feel about it. Bring back the victory animations. I miss them.
In the end, Ken's Rage 2 was so many steps forward, but so many steps back. When you're comparing the two, it's a lot closer than I had originally thought. Like, Legend Mode, for example, is such a step forward, but Dream Mode is such a step backwards. I remember playing through the first Ken's Rage back in 2010 and loving every moment of it. I only stopped once I got all the achievements because there was no incentive for me to do anything else. The game was done in my eyes. Nowadays, I do play these games after getting all the trophies or achievements. Hell, I'm still playing Dynasty Warriors 8 very frequently, and I popped the platinum for that over a year ago. But I don't think I'd go back to the first Ken's Rage over this. I'd say that Ken's Rage 2 is definitely the better game, but the amount of things that got worse definitely brings down the overall score from all the improvements that were made. So, with all that's been said, I give Fist of the North Star Ken's Rage 2 a 7.5 out of 10. I had a lot to complain about. The fact that Legend Mode made several improvements like the length of the story, the removal of individual character stories, especially when they covered the exact same stages, allowing you to select different characters during some stages, and giving us way more variety in locations and color palettes, makes this game's Legend Mode leagues beyond what we got in the first game. But the static comic book cutscenes, a little too much time spent on Kenshiro alone, and the inability to collect scrolls for other characters while in Legend Mode makes this a story that you'll want to experience time and time again, but you may not want to do much else afterwards. Dream Mode is an incredible disappointment. It doesn't feel like a Warriors game anymore. It just feels like a knockoff. Sure, it appears to have Empires-like mechanics with the bases, but it's honestly one of the simplest modes of the franchise. I definitely make more use out of it than Challenge Mode, which we also didn't get. Oh no, you mean the mode that I never used? Aw, shucks.
Dream Mode is just a game of which base has the highest level. There could have been a bit more strategy applied to the gameplay mechanics, so there's more to the mode than just capturing bases with the same handful of bonus challenges that you can just ignore if you want. If it weren't for the trophies, extra costumes, and the fact that this is the only free mode option in the game, you could ignore it and just enjoy the story. There were also a bunch of things taken from this game from the first. The English dub, battle damage on male characters, the shirtless costumes for Ken and Rao. It just seems like they took quite a bit away from us with this release. But they fed us real good with the Legend Mode experience and the overall gameplay. This is why I still scored it above the first game, but just not by much. I'm really disappointed in all of the shortcomings we get. The main reason I'll be coming back to this game over the first is just because of the gameplay. Everything else is just kinda the same.
My god. It's what the critics have been saying for years. A Warriors sequel that's practically the same as what came before it. The prophecy.
Anyways, everyone, thank you so much for watching my review of Fist of the North Star Ken's Rage 2. If you enjoyed it, give it a like and subscribe for more. Have you had a chance to play either of these games? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to help support this channel and what I do here, you can join the Guild, just like these awesome people that you're seeing on screen right now. You can join them at the end of every single video for just $1 a month over on Patreon, or you can donate in a one-time fashion and join the volunteer unit over on Ko-fi. A special shout out to my Guild General Beggy Beg Beg for supporting this channel at the top tier. There's other rewards and other tiers as well, so check out the links that you see on screen, and I will see you all down in the comments.